Snow fell quietly over the forest that bordered my little cabin, each flake settling like a soft whisper on the pine needles and frozen earth. I had always loved winter, the way it made the world feel hushed and still, as though nature itself were holding its breath. Tonight, however, there was a tension in the air, subtle but undeniable, like the faint crackle of electricity before a storm. I wrapped my thick wool scarf around my neck and stepped onto the porch, boots crunching over the freshly fallen snow. The cabin lights glowed warmly behind me, casting long shadows across the yard. Normally, the quiet would have soothed me, but tonight, I felt watched. Not by a person I knew the nearest neighbor was miles away, but by something unseen, something waiting just beyond the reach of the lamplight. Pulling my coat tighter, I scanned the tree line. The forest loomed dark and dense, its tall evergreens bending under the weight of the snow. A shadow flickered between the trunks, quick and deliberate, vanishing before I could make sense of it. I blinked, thinking it must be an animal, perhaps a fox or a deer. But there was a peculiar quality to the movement, a fluidity that felt almost human. My stomach tightened. I shook my head and forced a laugh, trying to dismiss the unease that had settled over me. Moving back inside, I lit the fire in the stone hearth. The flames cast flickering light across the room, revealing the cozy familiarity of my cabin. Books stacked on shelves, a patchwork quilt draped over the sofa, a mug of steaming tea waiting on the coffee table. I sank into the armchair and hugged my knees, trying to calm my racing thoughts. But even as I tried to ground myself in the warmth of the fire, the feeling of being observed persisted. It was subtle, like a brush of cool air across the back of my neck, or a faint pressure in the corner of my mind. I closed my eyes, hoping it would pass, and that's when the dream began. I was walking through the snow-covered woods, the moon high above, brighter than I had ever seen it. Its light fell in long silver beams across the frozen ground. Then I saw them wolves. Dozens of them, their eyes glowing amber in the moonlight. They didn't move like ordinary wolves. They didn't stalk, didn't growl, didn't even breathe audibly. They simply stood, watching me, pleading. And one of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward, its gaze locking with mine. I wanted to reach out, to touch it, but my feet refused to move. I woke with a start, heart pounding, to the sound of wind rattling the cabin windows. I told myself it was just a dream. My life had been lonely since I moved here, days spent unpacking, cleaning and adjusting to the isolation that came with choosing a cabin in the middle of the forest. Dreams had always been vivid for me, often spilling over into my waking life with lingering feelings of unease. Still, tonight, there was something more. Something that made the hair at the back of my neck stand on end. I poured another cup of tea and sat by the window, staring into the dark expanse of trees. The snow had thickened, muffling most sounds, but I thought I heard a faint rustling near the tree line. My pulse quickened. I strained my eyes but saw nothing, just shadows shifting in the moonlight. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there, waiting. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in from all sides, leaving only your own heartbeat and the faint crackle of the fire. I forced myself to focus on the mundane, the way the steam curled from my tea, the soft ticking of the clock, the way the snow settled gently against the windowsill. But then I saw it, a pair of amber eyes, reflecting the moonlight, staring at me from the edge of the forest. I gasped, gripping the window frame as a shiver ran down my spine. The eyes were too high, too intense, too aware to belong to any ordinary animal. And then, before I could process it further, they disappeared, leaving the tree line empty and silent once more. I blinked, heart racing, trying to convince myself that it was a trick of the light, a reflection of the fire, or some figment of imagination. But the unease remained, thick and insistent. I tried to return to normal, to tell myself that the forest was just that, a forest full of harmless wildlife and shadows that played tricks on the mind. I sat by the fire, forcing myself to sip my tea, to read a few pages of the book on my lap, to feel grounded. And yet, even as the flames danced and the night deepened, I could not shake the sense of being observed, of something pressing just beyond my door dot. Then I heard it. A soft whine, muffled by the snow, a sound that was not quite a dog and not quite a human cry. I froze, straining to listen. It came again, closer this time, a sound that tugged at my chest in a way I could not explain. I wanted to step outside, to see what it was, but instinct warned me to stay. My mind raced with questions, every rational thought screaming that I should ignore it. And yet, something in me felt compelled to answer. A shadow moved across the snow, fast and silent. I caught the glimpse of a wolf, or perhaps more than one, slipping between the trees, its gaze fixed on me. The whine turned into a pleading whimper, a sound that spoke of need, of desperation, and somehow I knew it was directed at me. My hand shook as I stood, drawn to the door by a force I could not name. I opened it just a crack, peering into the cold night. The snow glistened under the full moon, and I thought I saw them again too, maybe 3, their eyes glowing like amber lanterns in the darkness. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to close the door, to retreat to safety, but my feet refused to move. They waited, patient, almost beseeching, and in that instant, I realized this night was no ordinary night. Something had arrived at my doorstep, something I did not understand. And I knew, deep in my bones, that my life was about to change forever. The next morning, the snow had settled in thick layers, muffling the forest in an eerie silence. I stepped outside with my boots crunching against the frozen ground, hoping the daylight would chase away the unease that had gripped me the night before. But the forest felt different, closer somehow, watching me. Even the wind seemed to carry secrets, whispering through the branches with an urgency I couldn't ignore. As I walked along the path to check the woodpile, I noticed something odd. Paw prints, or were they footprints, were pressed into the snow. They were too large for any ordinary animal, and the stride was too measured, too deliberate, to belong to a wild wolf. My pulse quickened. I had tried to tell myself the previous night had been a dream, a trick of imagination, but the snow proved otherwise. Someone or something had been near the cabin before sunrise. I tried to focus on mundane tasks, stacking wood, sweeping the porch, checking the mailbox. Yet no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the sense that the forest was listening, responding to me in subtle, unexplainable ways. Even the air felt different, thicker, charged, like static before a storm. I caught myself pausing mid-step, straining to hear sounds I couldn't quite name. A rustle behind a tree, the snap of a branch, a faint growl carried on the wind. By midday, things grew stranger. I went to check the supply shed at the far edge of the yard, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow, human-shaped, yet impossible. I spun, heart thundering, but the snow and sunlight reflected nothing but empty trees. Shaking my head, I tried to dismiss it as fatigue or imagination. But a small, almost imperceptible voice whispered my name, carried on the wind. My breath caught and I froze. Is someone there? I called, my voice trembling. Only silence answered me. Yet the sensation of being watched didn't fade. I felt a heat on the back of my neck, a prickling awareness that made my skin crawl. It was as if the forest itself, or the creatures that lived within it, were aware of me in a way I couldn't understand. That evening, I attempted to return to normal. I lit a fire, brewed tea, and tried to lose myself in a book, forcing my mind to focus on the ordinary. Yet the feeling of unease only grew stronger. The wind seemed to carry voices, soft murmurs that might have been the trees, or might have been something else. Sometimes I could swear they formed words, warning me, urging me to leave. Other times they felt like a call, drawing me closer to the forest instead. I began noticing other changes around the cabin. Objects seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. A chair slightly turned, a book not where I left it, footprints on the porch that didn't match my own. I tried to rationalize it, drafts, settling furniture, birds in the snow, but deep down, I knew something else was at play. The normal world I had trusted was beginning to feel fragile, like ice cracking underfoot. One night, as I sat by the fire, I thought I heard something at the window. My heart froze as a shadow passed over the glass. I held my breath, gripping the armrest, watching intently. A pair of amber eyes stared back at me for a single heartbeat, then vanished. I blinked, unsure if I had truly seen it. Yet the lingering warmth of awareness, the sense that someone or something had been so close remained, pressing against my chest. The forest was quiet that morning, the snow soft underfoot, the mist curling gently between the trees. It was as if the world had taken a deep, steadying breath after the storm of the previous nights. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to simply be walking slowly, feeling the snow crunch beneath my boots, and listening to the faint whispers of the wind through the evergreens. He walked beside me, closer than ever, amber eyes scanning the forest with that familiar intensity. But there was a softness now, a weight lifted from his shoulders that had not been there before. He was still powerful, still formidable, but the shadows that had once coiled tightly around him seemed gentler, less menacing. We had faced the worst together, and something fundamental had shifted between us. I glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "It's peaceful," I said softly, almost like the forest itself is breathing easy. He smiled, a rare, genuine curve of his lips that warmed the icy morning air. "It is," he agreed. That peace is earned, and it is fragile. The world beyond the forest still turns, and not everything can be controlled. What we have, it's rare, and it's worth protecting together. I felt my chest swell with a quiet, deep contentment. We had been through trials I never imagined, dangers that had tested trust, courage, and heart. And yet, here we were still standing, still connected, stronger than the sum of our fears. I realized with startling clarity that I had changed. The fear that had once held me back had been tempered by experience, by love, by the courage to face the unknown. He reached for my hand, fingers brushing mine. The warmth of his touch grounded me, as it had countless times before, that now it carried something deeper, an unspoken acknowledgement of what we had survived, and what we had gained. "You've grown," he said quietly, amber eyes meeting mine. "You've become someone stronger than even you believed." "I had help," I said softly, squeezing his hand. "You've helped me more than you know." "And you've helped me," he admitted, voice low. "You reminded me of what it means to care, to trust, to love fully. That is something I feared I had lost." The forest seemed to respond to our words, the snow glimmering faintly in the morning sun. I realized then that the world I had thought ordinary, the life I had believed mundane, had been transformed not by magic alone, but by the bond we had forged through trust, sacrifice, and understanding. We walked in silence for a while, letting the forest settle around us, the gentle rhythm of our footsteps marking the passage of time. I reflected on all that had been lost and gained, the fears we had confronted, the shadows we had faced, the moments of doubt and uncertainty that had tested the strength of our hearts. Each step reminded me that every challenge, every trial, had brought us closer, shaping not just our bond but who we had become. At last, we reached the small clearing where the sunlight broke through the trees. painting the snow in shades of gold and silver. He stopped and turned to me, amber eyes soft but intense. "This place," he said, gesturing around us, "is a reminder. The forest survived, as did we. But more importantly, we've learned something about ourselves." I nodded, feeling the weight of truth in his words. "We've survived," I said, "because we trusted each other. Because we chose to face everything, not alone, but together." He smiled faintly, then reached out, brushing a strand of snow-dusted hair from my face. "And that choice, that willingness to step forward, to trust, to embrace the unknown, it changes everything. You've changed everything, for me, for yourself, for what lies ahead." I felt a warmth rise in my chest, not from the cold, but from the recognition of our journey. The forest, the prophecy, the bond, the shadows, we had navigated them all, and in doing so, we had discovered a new reality, one where courage and love intertwined, where trust could overcome fear, and where the future, though uncertain, was no longer frightening. For a moment, we stood there, hand in hand, looking at the snow, the trees, the world that stretched beyond our understanding. The air was calm, the forest alive yet at peace, and I felt a profound sense of completion. The challenges we had faced had not been easy, but they had revealed the strength within us, the depth of our connection, and the power of a heart willing to embrace destiny fully. He drew me closer, amber eyes locking with mine. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together. That is a promise." I smiled, tears pricking the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief, from recognition, from the sheer intensity of the journey we had shared. "Together," I echoed. "Always." The wind stirred gently around us, carrying faint whispers of the forest, as if acknowledging our bond, our choices, our survival. I realized then that the story we had lived, the fears, the trials, the moments of wonder and terror had left its mark not just on us, but on the forest, the shadows, and the unseen world around us. And yet, even as I felt that sense of calm and triumph, I knew that we would never be the same. Our hearts had been tested, our courage stretched, our love tempered in ways that ordinary life could never replicate. We had gained something far more precious than safety: understanding, trust, and the knowledge that even in a world full of shadows and uncertainty, we could face anything as long as we faced it together. He held my hand a moment longer, then leaned down slightly, amber eyes soft and warm. "We've come far," he whispered. "And yet, the journey is only beginning. But whatever comes, you are not alone. And I will never leave your side." I felt a tremor of emotion, deep and steady, as I realized the depth of the truth in his words. Not just a promise, but a reality we had forged through trials, courage, and unwavering trust. I reached up, resting my forehead lightly against his, and felt the warmth of our bond, the unspoken acknowledgement of everything we had faced and everything we had survived. "Thank you," I whispered, voice thick with emotion, "for trusting me, for believing in me, for everything." He smiled faintly, brushing snow from my coat. "No, thank you," he said softly, "for choosing to face it, for stepping into your strength, for becoming the person I always knew you could be." We stood there a long time, the forest around us bathed in soft light, the snow glittering like a promise. I thought of everything we had endured, the fear, the danger, the shadows, the unseen enemies, and the bond that had carried us through. And I realized something fundamental. Even in a world filled with uncertainty, there is a power stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than even destiny itself. love, trust, courage, and as I held his hand, feeling the steady rhythm of his pulse against mine, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, no matter the shadows, the unknowns, or the challenges yet to come, we would face them together, stronger, wiser, and forever changed. The forest whispered around us, soft and eternal, as we took the first steps forward, not into the unknown alone, but together. And in that moment, the world seemed brighter, the snow lighter, and the bond between us unbreakable. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully believe that even in a life filled with shadows and prophecy, there is a place for hope, for love, and for the strength to face whatever comes next. And that place is here, with him. The days that followed were a blur of subtle disturbances and unshakable tension. I began hearing whispers in my sleep, indistinct words that vanished when I tried to recall them. On some nights, I dreamt of the wolves again, this time, more vividly. They ran toward me through the snow, their amber eyes fixed on mine, moving with a strange urgency that left me trembling upon waking. There was no fear in the wolves' gaze, only pleading and warning. I could not decipher their message, and the ambiguity made me restless and anxious. Even mundane routines began to feel like navigating a trap. Water splashed unexpectedly from the sink. Doors creaked open when I was certain I had locked them. And sometimes, I felt an invisible weight pressing against my shoulders, as though someone or something was standing just behind me. I spoke aloud, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But no answer came, only the whisper of the wind through the trees. It was during one particularly cold evening, when the sky was bruised with grey clouds, that I first felt the real danger. I had stepped outside to shovel the path to the road, the wind biting my cheeks and making my eyes water. The forest beyond the yard seemed almost alive, the snow shifting under unseen feet. I stopped mid-shovel, sensing movement just beyond the tree line. Then I saw it, a wolf, massive and glistening white, its eyes gleaming amber. But there was something different about this one. It wasn't just staring, it was studying me, gauging me, aware of my every motion. The hair on my arms stood on end. A soft, almost imperceptible whine escaped its throat, and I could have sworn I heard a faint word whispered in my mind. Do not ignore us. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, yet I couldn't move. My curiosity held me frozen, even as my rational mind screamed that I was out of my depth. I watched the wolf for what felt like hours, though in reality only minutes passed, until it slowly retreated into the forest. The moment it disappeared, I realized something crucial. The wolves, or whatever they truly were, had intentions. They were not wild animals. They were sentient, aware, and somehow connected to me. As night fell, I closed every door, double-checked the locks, and drew the curtains tightly. I tried to tell myself it was over for the evening, but the tension lingered, coiling in my chest. I could not shake the awareness that I was being observed, measured, and perhaps even judged. Something was approaching, slowly, deliberately, and I could sense it in every shifting shadow, in every whisper carried on the wind. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the forest press in from all sides. Every creak of the cabin, every howl in the distance made my pulse race. I was no longer alone in the woods. The ordinary world I had known had begun to fracture. And somewhere beyond the trees, waiting, watching, were the wolves, or rather, something far more extraordinary whose presence had already begun to alter the very fabric of my life. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the first step toward a world I could neither ignore nor escape. The ordinary life I had clung to was slipping away, replaced by something ancient, powerful, and utterly mysterious. And deep down, I felt it in my bones. Whatever was coming would not leave me unchanged. The next evening, I stayed inside, the cabin feeling simultaneously safe and suffocating. The forest beyond the window seemed to hum with life, the snow glinting silver under the pale moonlight. I tried to focus on my tea, but my mind kept drifting to the paw prints, the shadows, and the amber eyes I had seen only hours before. There was no denying it. Something extraordinary was happening here. Was brushing off the porch when I felt it, a presence at the edge of my awareness, strong and magnetic. I froze, gripping the railing. The air shifted, charged with a quiet energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. And then I saw him. He stepped from the forest like he had been waiting, every movement deliberate, fluid, and impossible to ignore. At first, I thought it was another wolf, but the shape shifted in the moonlight. Tall, strong, with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded the world around him, he looked almost human yet not entirely. His eyes amber, intense, burning with a strange light locked onto mine, and I felt as if someone had reached inside my chest and touched my heart, got my breath caught. I wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but my voice faltered, swallowed by the weight of his gaze. He moved closer, each step measured, silent over the snow. There was a danger about him, a wildness just beneath the surface that made my pulse race. And yet, there was also a strange warmth, a pull I could not resist. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, resonant, carrying both command and curiosity. I couldn't place it, but the sound resonated in my mind, almost like a melody I had heard somewhere long ago. Yes, I stammered. I saw you, My words trailed off. Everything about him left me uncertain, unsteady. His presence was magnetic, overwhelming, and somehow frightening. "You saw us," he said simply, and there was no accusation in his tone, only acknowledgement. "And now you can't unsee." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, and I caught the smallest hint of something human behind the wildness. My chest tightened as an unspoken understanding passed between us. I had glimpsed more than I should, and now I was bound to something far larger than myself. I tried to step back, but my feet refused. Part of me screamed to run, to retreat to the safety of the cabin. Yet another part, the part that had always been curious, daring, and restless, wanted to know him, wanted to see more. My pulse hammered in my ears as he drew near, his presence radiating both danger and something irresistibly alluring. "You must be careful," he said, though his gaze never left mine. "There are rules in this forest, rules you don't understand." His voice held a warning, but also an invitation, subtle and tantalizing. I felt both fear and fascination twisting inside me, a mixture I could not name. "Why are you here?" I whispered, barely audible. The words felt fragile in the cold night air. He tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I could ask the same of you," he said. "You weren't meant to be here tonight." His eyes flickered to the tree line, where shadows moved as though alive. Then he looked back, amber flames meeting mine. "But now that you are..." He left the sentence unfinished, and the unspoken implication hung heavy between us, making my heart pound. I realized with a start that there was a rhythm to him, a magnetic pull I couldn't resist. Even as fear urged me to step away, my feet remained rooted. The world narrowed to just the two of us. The snow, the firelight from the cabin spilling onto the porch, and the intensity of his gaze. I had never met anyone or anything that could hold such power without a word. And yet, here he was, demanding my attention, my awareness, my very thoughts. "You don't belong here," he said again, softer this time, almost a whisper. But even that whisper carried weight. I felt it in my chest, a strange tug, as though invisible threads connected us. My mind screamed that I should resist, yet my heart betrayed me, fluttering with a curiosity I couldn't name, a longing I hadn't understood existed. For a long moment, we simply stood there, the snow crunching faintly under his boots. I tried to read him, to understand him, but he remained enigmatic, a mix of danger and magnetism that left me dizzy and uncertain. Something about him felt familiar, though I could not explain why. The way he moved, the way he observed me, the subtle shift in the air around him, it was all intensely alive, and it made me feel more alive than I had in years. Then, as if aware of my hesitation, he stepped back slightly, giving me room to breathe. But the pull remained. Even as he receded into the forest, a part of me ached, almost physically, for his presence. I watched him disappear into the shadows, every sense alert, every nerve thrumming with anticipation. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying an almost imperceptible sound, a low whine, faint but urgent. I realized, with a shiver, that it had come from him. I retreated inside the cabin, locking the door but unable to calm the storm inside me. I poured a second cup of tea and sank into my armchair, trembling not from cold, but from the intensity of the encounter. Who or what had I just met? His presence lingered in my mind, bright and persistent, like a flame refusing to be extinguished. I could not explain it, and yet I could not stop thinking about it. Sleep came fitfully that night, broken by dreams of amber eyes and silvered fur. In those dreams, he was closer, reaching toward me, yet just beyond my grasp. I awoke in the early hours, heart racing to the soft sound of snow crunching outside. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a figure at the edge of the tree line. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. By morning, I understood something undeniable. My life had changed. I could no longer ignore the pull of the forest, nor the pull of the mysterious figure who had stepped into my world. He was dangerous, wild, unpredictable, and utterly impossible to ignore. And yet, despite every instinct telling me to run, I wanted to know him, to see him again, to understand the force that had entered my life so suddenly. Something ancient, magnetic, and forbidden had brushed against me, and deep down, I knew that whatever it was, it would not be satisfied until I had confronted it fully. The morning after my encounter with him, the world felt different. The forest no longer seemed distant, a quiet backdrop to my cabin life. It felt alive, watching, waiting. Every sound was sharper. The rustle of leaves, the creak of the cabin floorboards, the whisper of wind curling through the trees. I tried to carry on as usual, chopping firewood, brewing tea, and unpacking boxes, but something had shifted. Ordinary life had lost its hold over me. It began with small, unsettling coincidences. While walking to the mailbox, I caught sight of a shadow darting between the trees, faster than anything natural. I turned, expecting to see a bird or a deer, but there was nothing. Yet when I looked back at the path, I noticed the snow was disturbed not in the pattern of a human, but too deliberate for an animal. My pulse quickened, and I felt a strange tension knotting my shoulders, as if the forest itself were aware of me. At breakfast, I dropped my spoon. It clattered against the plate, startling me, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Outside the window, a figure paused at the edge of the trees. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the empty snow and the weight of anticipation. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, yet I couldn't shake the certainty that someone was near, watching, waiting. By midday, the coincidences escalated. I was stacking firewood when a log rolled under my feet in a way that felt unnatural, almost as though it had been nudged deliberately. I cursed softly, kneeling to pick it up, and caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A pair of amber eyes met mine from the shadow between the trees, then vanished. My breath hitched. I had been trying to resist the pull of the forest, to cling to ordinary life, yet the pull was growing stronger with every passing hour. Even inside the cabin, nothing felt secure. I would find objects slightly out of place, books shifted on the shelves. My keys no longer where I had left them. Even the firewood seemed rearranged overnight. I told myself it was fatigue or forgetfulness, but a part of me knew better. The ordinary rules of life no longer applied here. The world I had relied on, the one I thought I understood, was cracking. Then came the visions. I had been folding laundry when my head spun suddenly, a dizziness that left me clutching the edge of the table. The room blurred, and for a moment, I was somewhere else entirely. Standing in a snow-drenched clearing, the forest stretching endlessly around me. The air smelled of pine, and something else, something metallic, sharp, and alive. And there he was, standing at the edge of the clearing, taller and more commanding than I remembered. His amber eyes held mine, and I felt the same magnetic pull, the same heartbeat-stopping connection. I blinked, and I was back in my cabin, my hands trembling as I gripped the laundry basket. My rational mind tried to argue that it was a daydream, a trick of my imagination, but my heart knew the truth. The visions were not just dreams. They were warnings, invitations, a glimpse into a world I could not ignore. By evening, the ordinary world had become unbearable. I tried to leave the cabin, to escape the tension and confusion, but every path I took seemed wrong. The trees leaned closer than they should, the snow deepened unnaturally, and shadows twisted in ways that made my stomach churn. Even the sound of my own footsteps felt off, echoing differently, as if someone or something was walking just behind me. That night, the supernatural made its presence undeniable. I had decided to stay close to the cabin, lighting candles and double-checking every lock. The wind howled through the treetops, carrying with it a sound that made my blood run cold. A low, mournful whine, followed by soft, rhythmic footfalls in the snow outside. My heart raced, and I pressed my back against the door, peering into the darkness. And then I saw them, wolves, or something like wolves, moving with unnatural grace. Their amber eyes glowed against the moonlit snow, and their gaze was fixed on me. They did not attack, did not growl, they simply watched, circling the cabin with a purpose that left my pulse hammering. I realized, with sudden clarity, that they were not ordinary wolves. They were aware, intelligent, and somehow connected to me in ways I could not comprehend. The largest one paused, its eyes locking onto mine. Then, for the first time, it shifted its form, elongating, standing upright, revealing the silhouette of a tall, human-like figure. The transformation was seamless, fluid, and terrifyingly beautiful. My breath caught in my throat. I had known he was extraordinary, but seeing it with my own eyes left me trembling. "You can't run from this." His voice echoed in my mind, low and resonant. It carried both warning and invitation, impossible to ignore. "You've seen too much, and now the forest has marked you." I stumbled backward, my hands clutching the doorframe for support. My mind raced, trying to argue that I could leave, that I could ignore this, that it was all some mistake, but every instinct told me otherwise. The supernatural was no longer a possibility. It was here. It was real. And it was undeniable. For a long moment I simply watched, frozen, as he and the other shifters, the wolves I had glimpsed, the beings I had sensed, remained at the edge of my vision, silent, patient, and impossibly alive. The snow seemed to shimmer around them, the air vibrating with a quiet energy that made my skin prickle. I realized, with a shiver, that my ordinary life was over. The forest, the wolves, the alpha, They were no longer part of a distant story, a dream or a shadow in the night. They were here, and they had chosen me, whether I wanted it or not. My attempts to resist had failed, and the boundaries between the world I had known and the world I had glimpsed were dissolving as the moon rose high in the sky. Casting silver light across the snow, I felt the weight of the forest pressing in, the amber eyes watching, waiting and judging. I understood at last that my life was no longer my own. Whatever was coming would not be avoided. The ordinary had collided with the extraordinary, and the moment of danger, the undeniable, inescapable presence of the shifters was here. I backed away from the door, heart pounding, as the wind carried their soft whines and the faint rustle of movement through the snow. I knew that sleep would not bring safety, that dawn would not offer solace, and that the choice to remain ignorant of this world had been taken from me the moment I saw those pleading eyes in the forest. The supernatural was no longer a story. It was my reality. The morning after the night the shifters revealed themselves, I woke to a strange sense of anticipation. The air in the cabin felt thicker, charged with something I could not name. I made my way to the window, half expecting to see nothing, and yet there he was standing at the edge of the tree line, watching, waiting. Amber eyes glinting in the morning light. He radiated a calm intensity that made my chest tighten. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should open the door. Part of me wanted to retreat, to hide behind the warmth of my walls, but another part, curious, restless, and inexplicably drawn, urged me forward. Slowly, I stepped onto the porch, the snow crunching beneath my boots, and he tilted his head ever so slightly, acknowledging me. "You came," he said simply. No introduction, no greeting, just those words, low and resonant. Even in the simplicity of his voice, there was something magnetic, a quiet power that left me breathless. I didn't know what else to do, I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "I've never seen anything like any of this before." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate, yet fluid, almost weightless. "Most don't," he said, his eyes softening in a way that contradicted the wild, commanding presence he carried. "You're different. You see more than others. You feel more." I glanced down at the snow, suddenly aware of how loud my heartbeat felt in the still morning. "I don't know if that's a good thing," I whispered. "Sometimes it's a curse," he replied, "but it can also be a gift. And you are learning to notice." He paused, and I felt the pull of his gaze as if it could reach into my very thoughts. "You were stronger than you realize." I didn't know how to respond. His words weren't comforting in the usual sense. They were weighty, meaningful, and filled with a strange warmth that made my chest ache. For the first time since I had arrived in this cabin, I felt a connection that went beyond the ordinary, a link that was intangible, unspoken, yet undeniable. We spent the morning together, though not in words alone. He showed me how to move silently through the forest, pointing out the subtle signs of life, the way snow compresses differently under weight, the faint markings that shifters leave behind, even unintentionally. There was a gentleness to his guidance, a patience that contrasted sharply with the power and danger he seemed to carry naturally. I couldn't stop noticing the way his fingers brushed against branches to steady himself, how he leaned slightly forward when he spoke, the way his amber eyes softened whenever they met mine. "You're learning quickly," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Most humans would be lost in these woods after a day." "I have good teachers," I replied, attempting to mask the fluttering in my chest. The simple, polite words felt clumsy compared to the intensity of my thoughts. I could feel his presence lingering close, warm, and commanding, and yet safe. My curiosity about him was growing, twisting into something I couldn't quite name. As the day wore on, our conversation deepened. He spoke in measured tones about the forest, about his pack, and about the world I was only beginning to glimpse. Yet he spoke with restraint, revealing just enough to intrigue without revealing too much. Every word, every gesture, seemed designed to draw me closer, to make me feel seen in ways I had never experienced before. "You have a gift," he said at one point, his gaze never leaving mine. "You notice what most overlook. That is why they are. Watching you, watching me?" I asked, fear prickling at my spine. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, brushing a stray snowflake from my hair. The gesture was fleeting, delicate, but it sent an unexpected warmth through me, leaving my fingers tingling long after he withdrew his hand. His eyes softened, amber and unreadable. "The world you see is not the world most know. That is a dangerous truth. And yet, you are part of it now." We walked together along the snowy edge of the forest, the silence between us comfortable but charged. I wanted to ask everything, why him? Why me? Why now? But the words seemed inadequate to capture the swirl of curiosity, fear, and something deeper stirring inside me. The attraction was subtle, emotional, and entirely safe, yet I couldn't deny its intensity. "I've never felt anything like this," I admitted quietly, finally daring to voice what had been growing inside me. He glanced at me, a shadow of a smile tugging at his lips, then returned his gaze to the trees beyond. "Nor have I," he said simply. "And that is why this is complicated." There was a quiet weight in his tone, a restraint that suggested he understood boundaries, yet also hinted at the forbidden nature of the bond forming between us. That the afternoon passed in a haze of shared understanding and unspoken tension. Each glance, each gesture, each word seemed laden with meaning. I felt drawn to him, fascinated by his strength, his intelligence, and the strange warmth that belied his dangerous presence. And yet, even in that growing connection, there was caution, a reminder that this was not a world of ordinary rules. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow, he paused near a grove of trees. The air shifted, heavy and tense, as if the forest itself had grown still to watch. Then he moved in a way that made my heart seize a sudden, graceful shift, almost imperceptible. And I glimpsed something I wasn't meant to see in the fading light. His form changed briefly like a ripple in the air, revealing hints of something not entirely human. A fleeting shimmer of fur along his arms, a subtle elongation of his features, just enough to remind me that the man I was drawn to held secrets far beyond my understanding. I stepped back, startled, my pulse racing. What was that?" I whispered. He looked at me, eyes soft but unreadable. "It's part of who I am," he said, his voice low. "Something I cannot hide forever. Something that makes me different. You'll see more in time." The forest seemed to hold its breath with us, the snow sparkling faintly under the moonlight. My mind spun with a mixture of awe, fascination, and fear. I wanted to step closer, to reach out, to understand him fully, but a small, rational voice whispered caution. The moment was intoxicating, the bond undeniable. Yet I knew there were truths he could not reveal, not yet. For the first time, I realized that the attraction I felt toward him was not fleeting. It was rooted in something deeper, something that transcended ordinary life. And yet, even as curiosity and connection flourished, the glimpse of his hidden nature left me uneasy. There was a secret there, a hidden world that I could feel pressing against my consciousness. And I knew that my life was about to change in ways I could not predict. We walked back to the cabin together, silence stretching between us. My heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled between fascination and caution. He glanced at me once, amber eyes reflecting the moonlight, and I understood without words. He had marked me in a way I could not ignore. A presence in my life that would not fade. And then, as we reached the porch, something rustled in the shadows beyond the tree line. A sound so deliberate and precise that it made my pulse spike. The alpha's gaze flicked toward it, sharp and commanding, and I realized that danger, or at least the unknown, was never far behind him. That night, I lay awake in the cabin, the memory of his touch, his gaze, and the fleeting glimpse of his hidden form replaying endlessly. I understood something crucial. The world I had stumbled into was alive, full of secrets, and utterly impossible to ignore. And somewhere in those shadows he waited, magnetic, dangerous, and entirely impossible to resist. The morning was still and cold, the snow sparkling under a pale winter sun. I tried to resume a sense of normalcy, but my hands shook slightly as I prepared breakfast. Even the mundane tasks, the scraping of frost from the windows, the gentle clink of spoon against mug felt charge, as though the air itself carried a warning. I had caught glimpses of him yesterday, the way his form had shifted in the snow, hints of a hidden strength and a presence I could neither explain nor resist. And now, that knowledge lingered, twisting in my chest with equal parts fear and fascination. He arrived without warning, stepping from the tree line like a shadow made flesh. There was a calm power to him that always left me breathless, and today it was sharper, more pronounced. Amber eyes catching the sunlight, he watched me as I worked, silent but commanding. "Good morning," I said cautiously, aware of how unnervingly close he could feel even without touching me. "Good morning," he replied softly, voice low and steady, resonating like distant thunder. "I see you've been trying to ignore the forest. It doesn't like that." I swallowed hard. I'm trying to keep things normal. My words felt flimsy even to my own ears. "But it's hard." He stepped closer, eyes flicking toward the tree line as if reading some invisible code in the snow. Then he turned back to me, gaze steady, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken. There was a flicker and intensity I hadn't noticed before, subtle but undeniable. A hint of the wild, the supernatural, lurking just beneath the surface. "I need to show you something," he said. His tone was calm, almost gentle, yet carried a weight that left me tense. "You need to understand the rules of this world, if you're to survive it." I nodded, a shiver running down my spine. Fear and curiosity warred within me. I didn't want to be here, yet I couldn't tear myself away from him, from whatever this was. He led me into the forest, moving effortlessly over the snow. Every step he took seemed both silent and deliberate, as though the forest bent to his presence. I tried to follow, but I stumbled once, snow crunching loudly beneath my boots. He stopped, waiting, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw a subtle change in his eyes flickering amber that hinted at something inhuman. "You are noticing," he said quietly. "Good. You must notice. The forest reveals much to those who pay attention." I think I saw something yesterday," I admitted, voice small. "Your form, it shifted. You weren't fully human." My heart raced at the admission, half in fear, half in awe. He nodded, not denying it. "You are perceptive. Most cannot see beyond what they wish to see." He paused, letting the words hang between us. "What I am, it is not something easily explained. You may not understand it yet, but you will." I felt a mix of fascination and mistrust twisting inside me. I was drawn to him, captivated by his presence. Yet there was an underlying fear I could not ignore. Something about him was dangerous, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be here. My instincts screamed caution, yet my heart refused to obey Dot as we moved deeper into the forest. He demonstrated abilities that made me gasp in disbelief. He leapt effortlessly across a frozen creek, landing without a sound. He vanished behind a tree and reappeared a moment later, as if he had melted into the shadows themselves. Each demonstration left me trembling, not from cold, but from the realization that he was far beyond human. Yet even as awe coursed through me, doubt began to creep in. His abilities, his presence, the way he moved through the world, it was magnificent. Yes, but it was also alien, something I could not fully trust. My mind raced with questions I dared not voice. Could I believe him? Could I survive this world he inhabited? And then the moment of doubt struck. As we paused in a small clearing, I noticed him reach toward the snow, pressing his palm against it. The ground beneath responded, shifting slightly, leaving a pattern that seemed alive. I stepped back instinctively. "What is that?" I asked, voice tight with apprehension. He glanced at me, amber eyes soft but unreadable. "A trace," he said quietly. "It is a mark left by those like me. It shows where we have been, who we are." I swallowed hard, unease curling in my chest. The beauty and power of what he had shown me was undeniable, but so was the threat it carried. I wanted to reach for him, to ask for reassurance, yet a small voice inside whispered, "You cannot trust everything you see." Then, without warning, the shadows of the forest shifted. Something moved just beyond the trees, a figure I could not make out. My pulse surged as instinct screamed at me. He turned sharply, eyes narrowing, and for a moment, I saw the full force of his presence. Commanding, untamed, and utterly unyielding. "Stay back," he murmured, almost to himself. His hand flicked toward the shadow, and it vanished, slipping into the trees as if it had never been there. I looked at him, heart racing, and for the first time, I felt a pang of fear I could not disguise. He was protector and predator, guardian and mystery. The more I learned, the less I could understand him, and the deeper the pull between us grew. I wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that he would keep me safe, but the hidden power I glimpsed hinted at secrets I could not yet bear to uncover. As we returned to the cabin, the forest silent once more, my mind was a tangle of fascination and doubt. I had glimpsed fragments of his truth, his supernatural nature, his control over the forest, his abilities that went beyond human understanding. And yet, there was something he had not shown, something he kept hidden, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight slanted through the window, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. My thoughts kept returning to him. The pull of his gaze, the weight of his presence, the glimpses of power I could barely comprehend. I was drawn to him, yet I felt a quiet mistrust brewing alongside my fascination. And then it hit me. If he could show me only fragments, what else was he hiding? What dangers, what secrets, what truths lurked in the shadows he controlled? My mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. The attraction I felt was real, magnetic, and undeniable, but so was the fear that I was stepping into a world I might not survive. I realized, as sleep finally claimed me, that my heart and mind were at war. Fascination pulled me closer to him. Fear whispered caution, and doubt seeded itself in the spaces between. The man or creature I was drawn to had a hidden nature I could sense, but not yet fully understand. And that hidden truth, I knew, would change everything when it finally revealed itself. The days that followed were a delicate balance between wonder and unease. Every morning I woke to find the forest alive with whispers, the snow glistening as though it held secrets just out of reach. Yet the moments I spent with him, short walks through the trees, quiet conversations near the cabin, shared silences that spoke louder than words, were intoxicating. His presence was a constant draw, magnetic and impossible to resist. I felt seen in ways no one had ever noticed before, as though he could read the unspoken corners of my mind. And yet, the forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper. I began to notice things I hadn't before. Distant shapes moving just beyond sight, the faint sound of paws crunching in the snow, even when no wolves were near. A subtle tension clung to the air, and I sensed that we were being watched not by ordinary eyes, but by those who understood the rules of this hidden world. He noticed it too. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the tree line, painting the snow gold, he paused mid-step. His amber eyes narrowed, scanning the forest. "They're close," he murmured. "I should have warned you. There are others, ones who do not take kindly to outsiders, or to those who find their way here." I shivered, both from the cold and from the weight of his words. "Others?" I asked, hesitant. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, brushing a strand of snow-dusted hair from my face. The gesture was gentle, grounding, and yet it carried a strange electricity that made my heart race. "Some of my past. It doesn't stay buried," he said finally. "And now it's finding its way back." My stomach twisted. I wanted to ask more, to understand, but there was an edge to his voice, a caution that silenced me. The bond between us had grown stronger, undeniable, but now it was being tested by forces I could barely comprehend. Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Strange disturbances began to punctuate the calm of the forest. Footprints that didn't belong to him or his pack. Sudden silences where birds should have been singing. And glimpses of figures that disappeared the moment I turned. Each time, my heart skipped a beat, and I felt both fear and a strange thrill. The unknown was closing in, pressing against the boundaries of my ordinary life. And I couldn't pull away. He became more protective, his movements around me precise, deliberate, as if measuring every step for potential danger. I noticed the subtle ways he positioned himself when we walked through the forest, the way his gaze swept constantly, alert to threats I couldn't see. Yet beneath that caution, there was an unspoken desire to draw me closer, to anchor me in the storm of his world. One evening, as the wind howled through the treetops and the sky darkened with clouds, he led me to a small clearing. The air felt electric, the snow glowing faintly in the dim light. "I need to tell you more," he said, voice low. "There are things in my past, shifters, rivals, those who would see harm come to anyone who gets close to me. I can't promise safety." I felt a pang of fear, but also an overwhelming need to understand, to be near him despite the danger. I don't care," I said, almost without thinking. "I want to know, even if it's dangerous." He studied me, amber eyes searching mine as if weighing my words against some invisible scale. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well. But once you know, there is no turning back. The world you are entering, it does not forgive ignorance or hesitation." He began to share fragments of his story, carefully measured and selective. He spoke of rival shifters, of challenges that had forced him to make difficult choices, of a world where loyalty and strength determined survival. Each word was carefully chosen, revealing just enough to deepen my understanding without overwhelming me. And yet, even in his restraint, there was a raw honesty that made me trust him more, even as fear lingered at the edges of my heart as he spoke. I realized how deeply I was drawn to him. The danger, the mystery, the magnetism, all of it pulled me toward him in ways I could not resist. I was learning to navigate this strange, perilous world, and my connection to him was the anchor keeping me steady. Each glance, each touch, each shared moment felt like a lifeline, binding me to something greater than myself. But just as the bond deepened, the shadows of his past emerged. One night, while I was alone in the cabin, I noticed a figure at the edge of the forest, a presence that felt familiar yet threatening. My breath caught as I realized that whoever it was knew him, knew this place, and had followed us. The air grew tense, charged with anticipation and unspoken threat. He appeared moments later, as if sensing the intrusion, moving with effortless grace between the trees. "They've come," he said softly, amber eyes darkening. "And you must be careful." I felt a surge of fear, but also a strange exhilaration. The world he inhabited was no longer just stories or shadows, it was real, immediate, and inescapable. And with that reality came a choice: to retreat into the safety of ignorance, or to surrender to the pull of destiny, whatever it might bring. The figure in the forest shifted, stepping forward just enough for me to glimpse their face. Recognition struck me like lightning. The moment was frozen in time, my mind spinning with possibilities. He looked at me, then at the intruder, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something unreadable: pain, hesitation, maybe even regret. The connection between them was evident, history woven into every glance, every movement. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. Who is that?" I whispered, fear and curiosity mingling. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Someone from my past," he said finally. "Someone who has unfinished business, and whose return complicates everything." My mind raced. The bond between us had grown stronger than I could have imagined. Yet now I faced uncertainty. Could I trust him completely? Could I step fully into this world with all its dangers and mysteries? The forest seemed to hold its breath, the snow shimmering like crystal under the moonlight, as though urging me to make a choice. I realized, with a mixture of fear and longing, that this was the moment where my life truly diverged from the ordinary. I could pull away, retreat into safety, and try to ignore the pull of the supernatural world and of him. Or I could surrender, step fully into destiny, and embrace the connection that had grown between us, no matter the risk. And yet, even as I considered the choice, I couldn't shake the unease. The figure in the forest, the shadows of the past, the unknown threats. It was a reminder that the path ahead would not be simple, that trust and courage would be tested. I looked at him, amber eyes reflecting the flickering moonlight, and felt the full weight of the decision pressing down on me. The wind swept through the treetops, carrying the faint whisper of movement, and I knew that whatever I chose, nothing would ever be the same. The ordinary world was gone, replaced by a life of wonder, danger, and impossible connection. My heart pulled toward him, my instincts urged caution, and my mind spun with the possibilities of what lay ahead. And in that frozen moment, with snow crunching softly under our feet and shadows stretching through the trees, I understood that the next step I took would define everything. Retreat or surrender, safety or destiny. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension coil in my chest. My eyes met his once more, and I knew that the choice was mine, that the forest, the shadows, and the pull of his world would not allow me to wait. The unknown waited, and so did he. The forest had been quiet for days, unnaturally quiet. Snow lay thick on the ground, undisturbed except for the faint tracks of his pack. I had grown used to the rhythms of this hidden world, its subtle signals, its warnings, its whispers, but a part of me still clung to questions I didn't dare voice. Who was I in this story? And why had the forest and he chosen me? The answer came unexpectedly. It was evening when he led me to a clearing I had never seen before. The trees arched overhead, their branches forming a natural cathedral, and the snow sparkled with an ethereal light. "There's something you need to know," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of truth. "It's about your past, about who you really are." I froze, my heart pounding. "My past?" I whispered. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, amber eyes steady. Your arrival here was not an accident. You carry a lineage that is older than the forest itself. A bloodline that connects you to the very shifters you've come to know. And to a destiny you cannot yet imagine. I staggered back slightly, disbelief and fear rising like a storm. I don't understand. My family, they were ordinary. I've never ordinary. He interrupted gently, almost a smile tugging at his lips. That is what they wanted you to believe. But the truth is, your family has been intertwined with this world for generations. There are those who have hidden it, perhaps to protect you. Perhaps to prevent a prophecy from unfolding too soon. I shook my head, struggling to make sense of his words. Prophecy? Hidden bloodline? It sounded like a story, a fairy tale meant to scare children, but the intensity in his eyes told me otherwise. He wasn't joking. He wasn't spinning a tale. You carry the mark of the seer, he continued, gesturing to the snow around us. It is subtle, almost invisible, but it has been in your blood for generations. Your ancestors walked between worlds, human and shifter alike, and they left behind a path that leads to you. The forest has sensed it. That is why you were drawn here. Why you could see what others cannot. A chill ran through me. My life, what I had thought was ordinary, suddenly seemed like a prelude, a setup for a story I had not known I was part of. But why me? I asked, voice barely audible. Why now? Because the balance is shifting, he said. The prophecy speaks of a time when one with your blood will choose between a path of safety and a path that binds the human and shifter worlds together. Your choices matter now more than ever. I staggered backward, snow crunching beneath my boots, trying to grasp the enormity of his words. My mind spun with questions, doubts, and fear. I don't even know what I'm capable of, I whispered. How can I be responsible for any of this? He reached for my hand, gentle, grounding. You already are responsible, even before you knew it. That is why you were drawn to me, to the pack, to the forest. This was never a chance encounter. This was fate calling. The forest seemed to lean in closer, the wind whispering through the trees like a chorus of unseen voices. I felt it, the weight of destiny pressing against me, the sudden understanding that my ordinary life had been an illusion. Everything I had known, everything I had believed about myself, was about to change. I sank to a snow-dusted log, head in my hands. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, fear and awe mingling in my chest. I don't know if I can be what you say I am, or what the prophecy wants me to be. You are not alone, he said softly. You never were. But understanding your past is the first step to controlling your future. You must learn, accept, and embrace it even if it terrifies you. I looked up, searching his face for reassurance. His amber eyes were steady, but there was a tension there I hadn't noticed before. A weight that made my stomach twist. There's more, isn't there? I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. He nodded slowly. There is always more. Secrets have a way of layering upon one another, and sometimes they reveal truths that are difficult to bear. Before I could respond, a sudden shimmer passed over him, a subtle shift in the way light caught his form. For an instant, he seemed less human, more like the creature I had glimpsed before. A flicker of fur along his arm, a sharpened intensity in his gaze, something that reminded me that the man I had come to trust was not entirely as he appeared. My pulse quickened. You're hiding something from me, I said, voice trembling. Part fear, part accusation. You always are. He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. I am, he admitted. And the truth is, it may change everything you think you know about me, about us, about the path ahead. You have to be ready. Before I could respond, the ground beneath us trembled faintly, almost imperceptibly. The wind howled, and I felt a pull deep within my chest, as though the forest itself had stirred to remind me that my choices, my lineage, and his secrets were all intertwined. My heart raced, fear mixing with fascination. "You must understand," he said, taking a step closer, "that what you've seen of me, what you feel, it is only the surface. There are layers beneath, and some are dangerous even for those who care for me. You have to decide if you are willing to face them." I swallowed hard, trembling. I don't know if I can," I whispered. But even as I said it, a strange pull tugged me forward. A part of me, a part I hadn't known existed, wanted to see it all, to understand, to embrace the truth no matter how frightening. And then it happened. From behind the trees, a sudden shadow moved faster than I could follow. I blinked, and when I looked again, a figure stood there, their form strange, their eyes impossibly bright. And then I froze, heart lurching, as recognition struck me like lightning. The figure's gaze met mine, and I realized with a shock that the person or being before me carried a mark identical to mine. My mind reeled. "Who? What are you?" I whispered. He stepped in front of me, amber eyes flashing. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tight. "But whoever they are tied to you, tied to your bloodline. And this changes everything." For the first time, I felt the weight of true uncertainty. My past, my lineage, my destiny, it was no longer a story unfolding in the shadows. It was here, alive, and intertwined with someone who might hold answers or dangers I could not yet comprehend. I looked at him, searching his face for guidance, for reassurance. But all I found was a flicker of worry, a reminder that even he did not know the full truth. And in that moment, under the silver glow of the snow and the ancient trees, I understood one thing clearly. My identity, my fate, and my heart were all bound together in a way I could never have imagined. And the truth, when it fully revealed itself, might shatter everything I thought I knew. The forest seemed alive that night, its branches swaying even though the wind was still. Snow glittered like shattered glass, reflecting the pale moonlight. And every shadow seemed to stretch farther than it should. I could feel the pull of the world. I had stepped into the hidden realm of shifters, secrets, and destinies intertwined with my own. He was there, standing at the edge of the clearing, amber eyes scanning the darkness with a focus that made my chest ache. There was a tension in his posture, a coiled strength, and I realized just how much I had come to rely on him, not just for guidance, but for safety, for understanding. The bond between us had grown beyond curiosity. It was a tether, fragile yet unbreakable. "I sense something," he said quietly, without turning to look at me. "There's movement. Something or someone approaching." I shivered, both, from the cold and from the awareness that danger was no longer abstract. "Should we?" "We need to be cautious," he interrupted gently. "But we can't run, not yet." His hand brushed mine briefly, grounding me, and the warmth from that touch made me realize how deeply I had come to trust him, how much I depended on his presence. As we moved carefully through the snow, I noticed a disturbance near the edge of the clearing. Shadows seemed to flicker unnaturally, and I felt a strange sense of being observed. Every instinct in me screamed that we were not alone. Then I saw them figures just beyond the trees, moving silently yet deliberately. I couldn't make out faces, only the glint of eyes and the faint shimmer of shapes that weren't fully human. My pulse quickened. "Who are they?" I whispered, fear twisting in my chest. He paused, amber eyes narrowing. "Rivals or perhaps old enemies," he said. They know of me, and now they know of you. Of me? My voice trembled. Why would they care about me? Because of your bloodline, he said, his tone grave. The mark you carry is rare. It makes you significant in ways you do not yet understand. And for some, significance is dangerous. I felt a mix of fear and frustration. I had come to trust him completely, yet now the very thing that bound us together, the secret of my lineage, was also the reason danger was closing in. Could I believe in a future with him if the world itself seemed intent on keeping us apart? He reached out again, this time gripping my hand firmly. We face this together, he said. You must trust me. Do you? I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to believe him, to step fully into the bond we had formed. Yet doubt whispered in my mind, the glimpses of his hidden form, the fragments of truth he had shared, and now the presence of unseen enemies. All of it raised questions. Could I truly trust him, or was I walking willingly into a world I couldn't control? Before I could answer, a flicker of movement caught my eye. The figures shifted closer, and I saw that they weren't just observing. They were testing us, circling the clearing with precision. My heart pounded. We have to do something, I said, tension twisting my voice. He gave a brief nod, eyes flicking over the shadows. Stay close. Watch. Learn. Trust your instincts. We moved through the trees cautiously, following the faint path he traced. I could feel the weight of his presence beside me, steady and protective. Yet there was an unspoken vulnerability too. He was powerful, yes, but even he seemed aware that the forces we faced were not trivial. As we reached a small clearing, he stopped suddenly, crouching slightly. I followed his gaze and gasped. There, partially hidden among the snow-laden branches, was a set of markings, ancient symbols, etched into the ground and glowing faintly. My stomach twisted. What is that? I whispered, awe and fear mingling in my chest. He studied the symbols carefully. A warning, he said finally. It marks territory, but also intention. Whoever did this wants us to know they are capable. They are clever and patient. They will not strike immediately, but they will strike. I felt the full weight of his words. The bond between us had grown stronger than anything I had known. Yet now the threat of being torn apart was tangible, immediate. And in that tension, I realized something terrifying. Even if we survived, the trust I placed in him and the trust he placed in me would be tested in ways neither of us could yet foresee. He turned to me, amber eyes softening. I need to know something, he said quietly. Do you trust me enough to follow, even if it means stepping into danger? I looked at him, at the calm yet commanding presence, at the protective warmth he offered, and I felt the pull of my own heart. I wanted to say yes, to surrender to the bond, to embrace the destiny that had drawn us together. But the shadows of doubt lingered, whispering that not everything was as it seemed. I began, then faltered, the words caught in my throat. He reached out, gently brushing snow from my hair. It's okay, he said softly. I will not force you, but the choice must be made. Either you step forward, or you step back. There is no middle ground here. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. The forest, the enemies, the unseen threats, they all pressed in. And yet, even amidst fear, the pull of the bond between us was undeniable. Every glance, every touch, every shared moment had led to this point. Then, as if the forest itself were answering, a low, resonant howl echoed through the trees. I froze, recognizing the sound instantly. It wasn't one of his pack, it was something different, something deliberate. My pulse quickened as I realized the warning was not abstract. It was personal, aimed directly at us. He stiffened beside me, jaw tight, amber eyes scanning the shadows. "They are testing us," he murmured, "and soon they will act." My stomach twisted. Fear, anticipation, and fascination collided inside me. The bond between us was stronger than ever, yet the danger was immediate. And trust, the very thing that had held us together, was about to be tested like never before. I glanced at him, searching for reassurance, for a hint of certainty. But even he did not look certain. He was powerful, yes, but even the strongest can be challenged. And now, the forces aligned against us unseen. Clever, patient threatened to separate what had grown between us. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing, barely visible, and I felt my breath catch. The choice loomed larger than ever. Step forward into danger, trust fully, and surrender to destiny. Or pull back, retreat into caution, and risk losing what I had found. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a tension that pressed against my chest. Every instinct told me to step back. Every heartbeat urged me to step closer. The forest, the snow, the shadows, they all seemed to lean in, waiting for my decision. And as I stared into his amber eyes, feeling the pull of the bond between us, I realized that the next choice I made would define everything. My trust, my courage, and the path we would walk together or apart. The forest held its breath. Snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the forest in silence so deep it pressed against my ears. Every crunch of my boots sounded unnaturally loud, and I felt a shiver run down my spine, not from the cold, but from anticipation. The pull of the forest, of the world I had stumbled into, had never felt stronger, and neither had the presence beside me. He was there, just ahead, moving with that calm, measured grace I had come to rely on. Amber eyes glinting in the moonlight. He seemed almost untouchable, yet I sensed the tension coiling just beneath the surface. Something dark had shifted. The peaceful protector I had known now carried a dangerous intensity, as if preparing for a storm I could not see yet. "They are coming," he said softly, voice tight. "And this time, there will be no warning." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. "Then we face them." He turned to me, his gaze piercing, a flicker of something darker flashing across his amber eyes. "We do," he said. "But you need to understand, this is not just danger for the body. This is danger for the heart, for the choices you make. Once you step fully into this, there is no retreat." The words hit me harder than the snow-laden branches around us. My mind spun with the weight of destiny, the pull of our bond, and the threats that had grown ever closer. Every step forward felt like a decision, every heartbeat a countdown. As we reached a clearing, I froze. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision figures, tall and deliberate, surrounding us without sound. The snow glimmered with faint traces of marking, an invisible warning etched into the ground by hands both skilled and sinister. My pulse surged. "They've prepared this," he murmured, voice low. "A trap or a test, and it's meant to challenge more than strength. It will test trust, loyalty, and the limits of love." I felt a shiver of unease. Trust and loyalty. I had placed both fully in him, but the forest, the shadows, the unseen forces were pressing against that bond. I didn't know if I could hold it together, if either of us could dot suddenly. One of the figures stepped forward, and I glimpsed a familiar mark, the same faint sigil I had seen before, the one that tied me to the prophecy, to my bloodline. My stomach twisted. They know me," I whispered. "Why would they care?" "They care because of what you represent," he said, amber eyes narrowing. "Because of your bloodline and because of us. They want to break the bond before it grows any stronger. And they will try anything." My chest tightened. The bond between us had grown stronger than I had thought possible. Yet the threat was immediate, tangible, and relentless. And then I realized something darker. Even he, powerful as he was, seemed aware of forces he could not fully control. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers that seemed to curl around my mind. I staggered slightly, disoriented, and he caught me instinctively. "Steady," he murmured, hand gripping mine. The warmth of his touch was grounding, yet there was an edge in his eyes I hadn't seen before. A shadow of the dangerous, darker side he had kept hidden until now. He stepped forward, stance shifting, amber eyes flashing. "I will not let them take you," he said, voice low and resonant. "But you must be ready to see me as I am. Not just the man you know, but the power that I am capable of." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "I trust you," I said, though my voice trembled. Deep down, I knew that trust would be tested in ways I could not yet imagine. The first figure lunged, movement swift, and the forest seemed to blur around us. He reacted instantly, not with brute force, but with precision and an intensity that made my chest ache. I saw the darker side of him now, not cruel, but controlled, formidable, and willing to do what was necessary to protect what he cared for. My pulse quickened. Even as he moved, I felt the weight of choice pressing on me. Step fully into this world, or retreat into safety. Trust the bond, or deny the pull that had grown between us. Every instinct screamed that this was a turning point. I could no longer stand on the edge. I had to choose, or risk losing everything. The figures moved around us, shadows twisting in the snow. He met each challenge with controlled power, a flicker of danger flashing in every movement. And yet, there was a moment of flicker where he glanced at me, and I saw something raw and unguarded, something vulnerable beneath the armor of strength. He was fighting not just for survival, but for me. But the test was not over. Another figure emerged from the tree line, faster, closer, carrying a force that seemed beyond the ordinary. The ground trembled faintly under its presence, and I realized that the stakes were higher than ever. I could feel my heart lurching with every step. The bond between us was undeniable, but now it was being challenged in ways that threatened to separate us completely. He moved in front of me, amber eyes flashing, a protective barrier I could not penetrate. "Stay close," he said, voice steady but tense. "Whatever happens, trust in what we share, but be ready to act if necessary. You may have to make choices I cannot make for you." I nodded, feeling a strange surge of courage and fear intertwining. The forest, the shadows, the prophecy, all of it pressed in. Yet I knew I could not turn away. My trust, my love, my very fate were bound to him, and to the choices I made in that moment. Suddenly, the figure closest to us shifted in a way that made my breath catch a subtle movement. Almost imperceptible, yet unmistakably supernatural. The snow around it shimmered unnaturally, as if reacting to the power it carried. And then it struck not with violence, but with intent, a movement meant to separate, to test the bond we had built. He reacted instantly, moving between us, amber eyes flashing with intensity. The darker side I had glimpsed now fully emerged, controlled yet formidable as he intercepted the figure. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, the snow glowing faintly with the energy of confrontation. I felt my heart tighten. The bond between us, the trust we had built, it was being challenged like never before. And then I realized something terrifying. Even if we survived, even if he protected me, there were choices I would have to make, choices that could change everything. A sudden gust of wind carried a faint whisper, almost a voice, across the clearing. "Choose, or lose everything." I looked at him, amber eyes locked with mine. And I understood the gravity of the moment. The confrontation was not just about survival. It was about trust, about love, about stepping fully into the destiny that had been drawn for us. And then, without warning, a blinding flash of light erupted from the edge of the clearing. I shielded my eyes, heart pounding. When I opened them again, he was gone, vanished from my side, and the shadows had shifted, leaving me alone in the snow. My chest tightened, panic and disbelief warring within me. I could hear movement in the forest, faint but deliberate. The unknown had claimed him, if only for a moment, and I was left with a choice I had never anticipated. Step forward into the unknown alone, or retreat into fear and risk losing him forever. The wind howled, snow swirling around me like spirits of the forest, and I realized with a jolt that my destiny and the bond between us had reached a precipice. Whatever happened next would change everything. And then, just as the first real howl of challenge echoed through the trees, I understood the truth of the moment. The choice was mine. The path forward was uncertain. And the love I had come to trust, the bond I had come to depend on, it hung by a thread, threatened by forces beyond my understanding. The forest waited. The shadows waited. And I, trembling in the snow, knew that nothing would ever be the same. The snow had turned to a light, swirling mist, drifting across the forest like a whisper of secrets. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, weighed down not by the snow, but by the absence of him. He was gone, snatched into the shadows by forces I could barely comprehend, and the bond that had tethered me to this world now pulled with sharp, aching intensity. Fear coiled in my chest, a cold, relentless presence. But beneath it, a spark of determination burned. I had come too far, learned too much, to let darkness or uncertainty steal the one person who had anchored me in this strange, beautiful, terrifying world. I moved cautiously, tracing the faint imprints in the snow that he had left, relying on instinct, memory, and the subtle energy of the forest itself. Every whisper of wind, every subtle shift in the trees, felt alive, guiding me toward him, urging me forward. And then I saw them. Figures cloaked in shadows, circling a small clearing up ahead. The same rivals, the same threats that had been testing us for weeks, now stood fully revealed. They did not attack, not yet. Their presence was deliberate, a challenge meant to provoke, to test, to weigh my resolve. And there, at the center of the clearing, stood him. He looked smaller somehow, though still formidable, amber eyes fixed on the approaching shadows. But there was a tension in his posture I had never seen before, a vulnerability I could not ignore. I froze, heart lurching. The pull between us was undeniable, yet the danger pressed in from every side. I had to make a choice. Step forward, trusting in the bond we shared, or hesitate, and risk losing him forever. Steeling myself, I stepped into the clearing, snow crunching softly under my boots. The wind shifted, carrying a faint energy that made the hairs on my arms rise. "I'm here," I called, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I trust you, and I'm not leaving." His head turned toward me, a flicker of relief and admiration in his gaze. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said, voice low, almost a whisper, yet full of power. "This isn't just about bravery, it's about survival." "I'm done hiding," I said firmly, taking another step forward. "I'm done standing on the edge. Whatever happens, we face it together." For a moment the air seemed to hold its breath. The shadowed figures exchanged subtle glances, and I sensed a shift, a realization that I was not merely a pawn in their game. I was active. I was present. I had stepped fully into my own strength. The first shadow moved, not violently, but deliberately toward us, testing boundaries, probing. He moved beside me, protective and commanding, amber eyes flashing with intensity. And I realized, in that moment, that his darker side, the part I had glimpsed before, was not something to fear, but a force to trust. It was a strength he wielded to shield me, to protect what we shared. I felt the bond tighten, an invisible thread connecting us through the swirling snow and shifting shadows. It hummed with energy, with power, with something older than either of us. I realized then that our connection was more than emotion. It was destiny, intertwined with my bloodline, with the forest, and with the very forces that sought to test us. The shadows continued to circle, deliberate and patient, and then, as if sensing our resolve, they shifted, stepping back slightly. I didn't understand why, but I could feel that the challenge had begun not through violence, but through understanding, through the test of courage and heart. He glanced at me, amber eyes softening for just a moment. "This is it," he said. "Face the fear, trust the bond, and hold steady. Everything depends on it." My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from certainty. I had trained for this, not with weapons, not with physical strength, but with trust, courage, and the power that came from embracing who I truly was. I raised my head, heart pounding, and let the energy of the forest, the snow, and our bond flow through me. A whisper of movement approached, and I stepped forward instinctively. The shadows paused, flickering as if sensing the change. I felt a surge of clarity. This was not a battle of fists or force. It was a confrontation of truth, of trust, of love and courage. The moment we had been building toward had arrived. He reached for my hand, and our fingers intertwined. Amber eyes met mine, full of unspoken understanding. "Together," he said. "Together," I echoed, feeling the full weight and warmth of the bond between us. And then the shadows shifted again, dispersing into the mist, leaving the clearing eerily still. I blinked, heart racing. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. No one had been struck, no one had fallen, but the tension lifted, replaced by a quiet understanding. They had tested us, and in rising to the challenge, we had proven something undeniable, that the bond between us, forged through trust, fear, and connection, was stronger than the forces seeking to divide us. He exhaled slowly, his hand tightening around mine. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced what most wouldn't even dare to acknowledge. And you did it without faltering." Tears prickled my eyes, but I smiled through them. "I wasn't alone," I said. "You were with me, and that made all the difference." For a moment, we stood together in silence, the snow swirling around us, the forest alive with quiet approval. The storm had passed, yet the air hummed with energy, as if the world itself acknowledged that something fundamental had shifted. That even as relief settled, I could feel it, the faint stir of consequences, the whisper of destiny yet to be fully revealed. Our victory had not erased the past, the bloodline, or the prophecy. It had only confirmed that we were capable of facing it. And that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. He leaned close, amber eyes soft yet intense. "There is still much to come," he murmured. "But whatever awaits, we face it together. And you have proven that you are stronger than you ever believed." I nodded, feeling a sense of completion, yet knowing the journey was not over. I am ready," I whispered, "for whatever comes next. With you." He smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and something unspoken in his gaze. "Then let's return. There is more to prepare for, and more to understand. But tonight you have faced the storm and you have prevailed." The forest seemed to exhale with us, the snow settling softly, the shadows retreating to the edges. The danger had not vanished, but for now, we had stood firm, together, and discovered the depth of courage and love that bound us. And yet, even as we turned to leave the clearing, I felt a lingering uncertainty, a quiet whisper of the forest, of destiny, of forces beyond our control. Victory had been won, yes, but the world remained vast, mysterious, and full of challenges yet unseen. I looked at him, amber eyes meeting mine, and felt a strange thrill. Whatever came next, I knew we would face it together. But a part of me also knew that the fallout from this confrontation would ripple far beyond this night. Our lives, our bond, our destiny, they had changed forever. And somewhere, in the swirling mist of the forest, I sensed the faintest echo of another presence, an unseen force, waiting, watching, reminding me that the greatest tests were never truly over. The snow fell around us, soft and endless, as we walked back into the heart of the forest, hand in hand, ready to face whatever awaited.